That's a little easier for an artist because, the one that you work hardest on is usually the one that you're most proud of. I did a Final Fantasy VI triptych here that took me quite a while to complete because it's got 16 characters in it or something like that, and it was a bit of a slog, and I'm proud of how it came out. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said there are 6 of them?
No, the game is Final Fantasy VI.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
You said a triptych. So it's 3.
3 panels, yeah.
Again, early in the morning in Magfest.
Yeah, right.
Relatively early. How do you know when a work is finished?
Oh gosh. Usually I will work on something, and then I'll work on something for maybe a 2 to 4 hour block, and then I'll try to step away from it for a half an hour or an hour, and come back and look at it again. And so, when is the work finished is actually a question I have to ask myself in several different phases through drawing. In the rough sketching phase, I have to ask it. In the fine sketching phase, the inking phase, and the coloring phase. I have to ask each of those individual phases, is it done for this phase? So yeah, I'll ask that question about 4 times in the production of an image, and it usually happens after I step away for a while, or maybe overnight, and I come back and look at it with fresh eyes. Half the time I just realize oh, this is absolute garbage, and I just throw it away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of which mediums do you work in?
Yeah. Well, I sketch in Photoshop a lot. Not always, but I'd say 80 to 90% of the time I'm sketching in Photoshop, and then I do all my ink work with a traditional Japanese brush and ink, and on Japanese paper, just because the effect it gives you is pretty unreproducible, I guess. It can't be reproduced with other media, so you got to use that stuff. And then I scan that in, and I do a lot of my color digitally.
What inspires you?
Anybody who just shows incredible talent and vision in art inspires me. And a lot of times it might be kind of in line with what I do, in the same kind of wheelhouse, East Asian focused art. So in that regard, I follow a lot of tattoo artists who do Japanese style tattooing. I follow a lot of comic book artists and things like that. But then sometimes I'll just follow anybody who just shows incredible talent, even if it's not necessarily related to what I do closely. So I derive a lot of inspiration from musicians, sometimes dance, music. I already said music. Cinema, and then definitely I read a lot of comics, novels, poetry. I like to just kind of partake of a lot of different kinds of artwork, and try to glean inspiration wherever I can.
Now I noticed that you have some Star Wars themed pieces. What inspired that? Was it obviously you like Star Wars? Yeah,
I like Star Wars, and there's a huge Japanese cultural undertone in Star Wars, especially in the original 70s and 80s movies. It's gotten away from that a little bit, I think. But if you go back and look at George Lucas's vision for the Star Wars setting, it's very highly influenced by Buddhism and Eastern mysticism, all the way down to fashion elements that he used and things like that. So the jump from Star Wars to putting it in a traditional medieval Japanese setting was kind of easy.
Right. Who's this?
This is Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan, yeah. Interesting. It's pretty cool. A samurai lightsaber. What is your most important artist tool? Is there something special you can't live without in your studio?
Live without? I mean, I've gotten pretty addicted to working on a computer with a Wacom tablet. So that is crucial. And I think that I do need to have real brushes and real inks for when I'm inking. I couldn't reproduce the effects that I get with the digital brush when I'm inking. It's just they can't do what I do. So so yeah, those are the two things I definitely would need.
Is there an element of art you enjoy working with most, and why?
Line. I like line.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
It's direct and it's quick and it's pop. Line is the foundation of comics. It's the foundation of what I do, which is like ukiyo-e, like traditional Japanese printmaking. I really like line. Whenever I draw, I'm always thinking line first, and then I'll think value and color second. So, yeah, in terms of like breaking down art to elements, yeah, line.
All right. How did you start making art, and why do you continue making art?
It's kind of compulsive. I just have to do it. It's something that I enjoy, but also something that like continually like, what's the word? It's almost like this sweet torture, like something I have to be doing. If I were doing anything else, I think I would be unhappy. But at the same time, like doing art, I'm always like halfway unhappy because I'll draw something and I'll be like, oh, this is trash. So, I'm my own worst critic. But I think anybody who cares about what they do probably feels that way. Like anybody who's pushing probably feels like their best effort could be better.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of this, sweet torture of always pushing.
Mm-hmm. And so how did you start? When did you start?
Oh, just since I was a little kid. I mean, toddler. We're talking 2, 3 years old, drawing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd think I'd be better.
I know. You're
you'd think I'd be better after all those years. Yeah, I mean, back in like middle school and high school, I was a pretty serious student, and so I did draw a little bit during school and things like that, but I also worked hard at, paying attention to class, doing homework and stuff like that. So I think sometimes I might have lost a little bit of time in my formative years to just try to be a jack of all trades and try to get good grades and draw and blah, blah, blah. So I think I spread myself a little bit thin in my adolescence. But when I became an adult, around 22, 23, I realized like, I could just pass college with D's and I could focus on drawing because that's really what I want to get down to.
Mm-hmm.
So I started, approaching classes with how do I just graduate this thing? Or how do I just pass this thing so I can graduate? And I worked my butt off drawing, barely slept, worked, and it paid off. So It was about allocating time for what I wanted to focus on rather than just being like a people pleaser and just trying to, do everything. You can't do everything, so, yeah.
So when did you start working with a computer with your art?
In middle school and high school. My uncle worked at Adobe up in Seattle, and he always used to send me the software packages for free. It was really nice of him. So I'd draw things, scan them in, and then and color and things like that. And so I'm really grateful to him for sharing that with me. It was really kind of him. And so then when I got to college and we were in art classes and we were learning digital media, I picked it up like no problem because I had already had a couple of years of just goofing around on it. So yeah, that was really nice thing of him to do. Yeah.
So did you start doing the computer art because you saw that as the future, or is it just something you enjoyed, or what was your?
Well, I studied animation in college. That was my major, and ever since the mid-90s, a majority of animation has been produced through computers. And so when you get to animation school, sure, they work you hard on learning how to draw, but they also work you hard on like, here's how you use compositing software, here's how you use film editing software, here's how you use Photoshop. You have to have all those tools, or else you can't make movies. At least not the way they make them now. So it was never a question of my approach as an artist as much as it was like, this is my major. At the time I wanted to make films, and that was the medium to do it. So
yeah, sorry, I think the question made you sound older than you are. Like, being the future. What I meant is like being, your future.
Yeah.
No. Is my future.
Yeah,
versus...
it was just just answering the question the same way. It was the tool of choice for the goal that I had at the time, and has proved endlessly useful ever since.
All right. How did your first commercial art success, or art success however you might define it, change your process of making art, or did it?
Yeah, well, I'm going to go back a little bit. So, like, finding commercial success, first and foremost, I've learned has been, like, this kind of balance between, like, skill and then just sheer effort and, like, a numbers game. So, yeah, I'm not even answering your question, but it's just something that I wanted to share.
Sure.
I mean, I have, as an artist, I have had to kind of reinvent myself or create a new game plan, embrace a new medium, at least half a dozen times. So I started trying to make animated movies, and I did very well. I got an internship out in LA at a major studio, but then I decided I just didn't want that life that they live. So I moved on to children's books, and had some success there and provided a living for my family. And then I moved on to doing traditional Japanese printmaking. I've made a video game that took up 3 years of my life that got some awards, and I was featured by Apple on the App Store and stuff like that. I'm working on a comic book right now. I've done a lot of different things, and I've learned that like finding like success in art is about exploring, and it's about thinking like a business person while you also think like an artist. So moving on to answer your question, how did finding my first success change my process?
Yeah.
So it's I guess in light of what I just said, my process has always changed to match the goal that I had for my career. So I would think, I want to make a children's book. I need to learn how that all works. And people think they know how to make a children's book, but people don't know anything. Everybody's got a freaking manuscript for a children's book they want to write, and it's just like, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard. It's like it took a couple of years to figure that out. And that influenced my process, because you have to kind of match your process to the goal that you have in mind. And admittedly, I have been maybe an entrepreneur first and an artist second in a lot of endeavors, and in a way that might limit my like just sheer creative force, but in other ways it helps me channel that creative force into ways that provide a living and stability and make sure I don't end up homeless, So, in terms of my process, I always think like, what do I want to do creatively, and how do I sell that? It's like, how can I fulfill my creative needs, but also channel that in a way that other people will appreciate and want to support. So those are always the two questions that I have to balance. You can't do one or the other too much, or else you'll get out of balance and things go crazy. So, did anybody have a question?
I was just looking at the art and listening to what you had to say.
Cool. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
So, I was just going to add that I think artists throughout the ages have depended on, having patrons or, commissions. So that's what
it's a balance that we all have, right? I mean, like a lot of very, very talented artists, the most incredible geniuses of our time, like very few of them actually had a lot of creative freedom. Right. Unshackled, complete creative freedom. And a lot of those people who did have complete creative freedom were really unstable, miserable, but enlightened people, or at least inspired people.
Right.
I mean, like, yeah.
So, what role does the artist have in society?
Oh, gosh. Don't ask me.
The big question,
I mean, like, there's artists and then there's artists, right? People who, everybody's approaching their work for different reasons. I personally, I can't answer that. I mean, what's the purpose of like a politician? Are they there to change the world, or are they there just to get reelected and stay in office and make a career out of it, right? The answer is a little bit of both, probably, right? So is an artist's job just to survive, or is an artist's job to make the world a better place? Probably a little bit of both. just make their way in the world and hopefully not make it a worse place. I think.
Not make it worse. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What movies, books, or other artwork in science fiction or fantasy have inspired you?
Oh,
And we have Star Wars, obviously.
Well, I really love. If you are familiar, I really love the Shattered Sea series by Joe Abercrombie. Are you familiar with him?
No.
I think he's a British author, and he wrote a bunch of kind of. They're a little bit raw fantasy novels, and then he wrote a YA series called the Shattered Sea series. The first book's called Half a King, and they are fun. They're fun books, and some of the best written YA fantasy I've ever read. I get really impatient with a lot of fantasy. I can't read. What is that guy's name? What is his name? He wrote Sanderson. I can't read Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson. I hate his stuff. It's like he's never talked to humans before. It's like he's. Sorry, this is like going public. So if anybody disagrees with
you can make a comment.
Yeah,
Contact you.
Feel free to disagree with me. Oh no, don't contact me. Just know that my limitation or my opinion ends at my nose, I guess. Or it ends when you turn off this podcast.
Yeah.
But so there are some fantasy authors that I feel absolutely no character or emotional connection with their writing. I like science fiction and fantasy that starts with character first and concept second.
Yeah.
One of my favorite authors of all time is David Mitchell. Are you familiar with him?
No.
He's a literary writer who dabbles in sci-fi genre, and it's so funny because he won the Booker. No, he's shortlisted for the Booker Prize in the UK. Every novel he writes. And so all these literary hoity-toity, critics like him, but then he turns around and does all this crazy sci-fi, vampire, psychic war genre stuff.
Yeah.
While he's also a literary writer.
Yeah.
And he just sticks it to him so hard and says, I write what I want. He's not trying to be contrary, but he's just writing what he wants, and if people don't like it, they can go away. And if they do like it, get on board.
Yeah.
So I highly, highly recommend David Mitchell. Also, do you know the novel Stories of Your Life and Others?
No.
It's written, I forget the guy's name. It's with it's this collection of short stories, and it won some huge sci-fi prize when it came out. I think it was the guy's first novel. It was freaking insane.
Of course.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, Stories of Your Life and Others. Fabulous collection of sci-fi short stories. Great sci-fi, but it's great sci-fi because it focuses on people and people's experiences and their needs and their goals and their stories. So those are the best sci-fi fantasy things in my opinion. What else? And then there's some bad sci-fi and fantasy out there that I can't handle. I'll get halfway. I have mixed feelings about the Game of Thrones series, the Song of Ice and Fire books.
Right.
Sometimes George R. Martin is incredibly perceptive, and sometimes his books just feel like he's trying to kill trees with unnecessary prose. So,
yeah, dude, they're big ones. They're
book
thick.
5, I'm just like, what is the point of this book?
Yeah. I've heard similar things. Yeah.
But there are other times. I mean, he's a pop writer. I'm grateful for the time that he filled up in my life.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So there are a lot of works that I really like, but those are some of the ones that really stand out. Especially David Mitchell. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. David Mitchell jumps a lot into Eastern mysticism and how that mixes with science fiction and fantasy. It's really fun. Really good stuff. Anyway, yeah, that's all I got.
I'll check them out. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Sounds like something I'd like.
Are you more interested in let's see. I mean, gosh. His most recent novel is called The Bone Clocks, and it starts off with this kind of 1980s realism about a girl who gets pregnant and has to have an abortion, and it progresses into one of her ex-boyfriends meets a vampire cult, and they actually and he becomes an immortal Soul Stealer, and it ends in the 22nd century where everything's going to heck in the. It's crazy.
Wow.
It's an insane novel.
Yeah.
People didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
It's a fabulous novel.
I'll check it
The
out.
Bone Clocks.
Yeah.
The Bone Clocks. It's a good one.
Cool. Yeah, I like hearing about stuff that I haven't heard of before. That's pretty cool.
It's a good one.
All right. Is there an art piece you'd like to create that you haven't done so yet, and what is it?
Oh, I mean, all the above.
Yeah.
I got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep doing the fan art thing because it's enjoyable for me. My fans and customers really enjoy it, and at these conventions, I see I bring kind of like a ray of joy to people's lives. You know, as they're like looking at my work and they get to identify what all my cultural references are. That's a lot of fun. And then eventually, I want to make more video games. I've got a partner who's a programmer, and we'll be working on a lot of indie games in the next decade. I'm working on a comic right now, which is incredibly difficult but rewarding. So yeah, busy.
All right. And actually, that helped answer the previous one about what does the artist, what's their role in society. I think you just touched on it with the joy that they bring to people.
Yeah, I mean, everybody brings their own experience to art, so I don't know if I can force anybody to feel anything, but people feel what they want, right?
Yeah. All right, that's all the questions I have. Do you have any final comments or thoughts?
I appreciate this interview. Thank you.
Okay, and where can people find your work online?
They can Google Jed Henry, JEDHENRY. There are three of us prominently in the country. One is a male model. That's not me. I'm an ugly dude. And one is I think one is a guy who advocates for bringing U.S. servicemen's remains back from overseas wars. He's from like Minnesota. He's an older guy who brings corpses back for burial. And then I'm the other one.
Okay. All right. You're the artist.
I'm the artist.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Please visit chrisalvarez.com for more cool stuff. You can also find my website and social media information in the podcast show notes. Thanks for listening, and keep imagining the future.